Fatu had just finished her meal and felt a pressing need to find the restroom. She quickly flagged down a server and asked for directions. The server pointed her towards the restroom at the back. But when she arrived, the restroom was already occupied, and Fatu realized she couldn't hold it much longer. As she glanced around in desperation, she noticed a swinging door that led to the kitchen. Hoping to find another exit or restroom, she peeped through, trying to get her bearings, but it was hard to tell what was beyond. With no other choice, she slipped through the door and stepped into the kitchen, and was immediately hit with a sight that made her stomach churn. The kitchen was in terrible condition. Dirty dishes were stacked high beside the cooking area, and raw meat was left uncovered on a counter, attracting swarms of flies. The cooks, with unkempt hair and aprons stained with grime and food, moved about as if everything was normal. It looked as though those aprons hadn't been washed in ages. Fatu couldn't believe her eyes. She felt her stomach turn as she backed away, vowing never to eat there again. As Fatu looked around, she noticed that the entire kitchen floor was filthy, with grime and bits of food scattered everywhere. Rats scurried freely across the floor, undisturbed by anyone. Then, she saw the head chef, a large, dark-skinned woman wearing a sleeveless dress. Her teeth were stained brown, and her armpits, covered in thick, unkempt hair, were exposed. Fatu watched in horror as the woman scratched her armpit with the same spoon she was using to stir a pot of soup, making no attempt to wash it before continuing. Fatu felt a wave of nausea rise up. Clutching her stomach with one hand and covering her nose and mouth with the other, she tried to block out the awful stench that filled the air. Deeply disturbed, Fatu stumbled back into the dining area, her appetite completely gone. The moment she stepped outside, she was overcome with nausea and vomited up her meal, feeling both sickened and disappointed by what she'd seen. Fatu had always been a fan of dining out, exploring new spots across the city since she didn't cook much at home. She loved trying out the latest eateries and was well versed in the city's most popular joints. Dining out was her nightly routine, with a new restaurant to experience each time. But after this, she couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. It was an experience she would never forget. Fatu's friend, Amina, would often try to talk her out of eating out so often. "Fatu, don't you know it's cheaper and healthier to buy ingredients at the market and cook for yourself?" Amina would ask. "Why do you waste money on cooked food all the time?" But Fatu never paid much attention to Amina's advice. She saw nothing wrong with eating out. After all, that's what she'd grown up doing. When Fatu was young, her parents were constantly busy with work and business, leaving little time for family or household chores. Mr. and Mrs. Diarra had 3 children, Fatu, Kadi, and Aminata. But as soon as the children started school, their parents became more occupied, rarely giving them the attention they needed. Every morning, as they headed to school, their parents would hand them money to buy food. When they returned home in the afternoon, the kids would have to buy lunch from a food stall nearby. By evening, they would buy dinner from the same place, eating before their parents came home late at night. Fatu, the eldest, had naturally taken on the role of caretaker. Fatu never learned to cook, as her mother had never taught her. Their father, a respected truck driver, was often away on the road for long stretches, sometimes for 2 or 3 months at a time. Fatu's father, Al-Haji Diarra, never seemed concerned about anything beyond providing financial support for the family. As long as bills were paid, he felt his role was fulfilled. Her mother, Mariam, was a full-time businesswoman with a busy stall deep in the bustling market. She would leave home at dawn to avoid the heavy morning traffic and often returned long after the children had gone to bed. With her parents constantly absent, Fatu grew up learning how to fend for herself and take care of her younger siblings, Kadi and Aminata. She became familiar with street life and the hustle of city living, and over time, she and her siblings developed a preference for junk food and street snacks over homemade meals. Before Fatu finished university, her father passed away in a tragic accident. As her mother's business continued to grow, Cuddy and Aminata began helping her at the market, as Miriam was aging and needed extra hands to manage the busy stall. After completing her university studies, Fatu was assigned to a rural town far from her home for a mandatory one-year teaching service. It didn't take long for her to settle in and adjust to the new setting. It was in this remote town that she met Amina. Amina was also a recent graduate assigned to the same school as Fatu. The two quickly became close friends and started living together like sisters. But unlike Fatu, Amina rarely bought food outside. She preferred going to the market, buying ingredients, and cooking for herself, while Fatu, who never learned to cook, would seek out the local street vendors and restaurants, testing different places to find the best and cheapest meals around. Amina noticed that Fatu hadn't bothered buying any pots or plates for cooking, which she found odd. One day, Amina decided to bring it up, saying, "Fatu, you know it's safer and cheaper to cook your own meals. Why spend so much on street food every day?" Fatu took offense, snapping back, "Is it your money I'm spending? Have I ever asked you for help?" Amina, feeling she may have overstepped, apologized and explained she was only looking out for her friend. Despite Amina's concern, Fatu's habit of dining out didn't change. Then one day, as they were walking home from work, they encountered a well-dressed, handsome young man who approached them. "Hello, good afternoon. My name is Ibrahim," he said, looking straight at Fatu. He asked if he could speak with her privately and then told her that he was interested in getting to know her. Fatu and Ibrahim exchanged numbers and soon began talking frequently on the phone. Ibrahim was a successful businessman with several branches of his company across the country. He would often take Fatu out to fancy, expensive restaurants, and it wasn't long before Fatu found herself falling for him. One day, Ibrahim decided to visit Fatu at her home. She welcomed him warmly and offered him a soft drink. As they talked, Ibrahim's stomach began to growl, and he admitted he was hungry, asking if Fatu could cook something for him because he wanted to taste her cooking. He even offered to take her to the market so they could buy ingredients together. But to his surprise, Fatu dismissed the idea, saying, "Why waste time cooking? Let's just call one of those nice restaurants and order a delicious meal instead." Ibrahim refused, insisting that he really wanted to taste her cooking. Seeing how serious he was, Fatu finally confessed, "I'm sorry, Ibrahim, but I don't know how to cook." Ibrahim was taken aback. Fatu was elegant and refined, so he was surprised to learn that she lacked this basic skill. Disappointed, he quickly made an excuse and left. Later that evening, when Amina came home, she found Fatu lying on her bed, looking sad and deep in thought. Amina noticed Fatu looked unusually down and asked what was bothering her, but Fatu avoided the truth. Instead, she claimed that she was upset about some lost money, not wanting Amina to tease her. After all, Amina had been warning her for ages about eating out too much. One afternoon, on her way home from work, Fatu noticed a new, stylish restaurant along her route. It had just opened, and she had never tried it before. She admired the beautiful exterior, with its luxurious design and the steady stream of customers going in and out. Curiosity got the best of her, and one day, she decided to give it a try. When she walked in, she was immediately impressed by the elegant decor. Despite its classy look, the prices on the menu were surprisingly affordable. No wonder this place is so popular, she thought, scanning the menu. A friendly waiter soon approached and took her order, bringing her food promptly. The meal was delicious, and from that day on, Fatu became a regular customer at the restaurant. Fatu quickly became a daily customer at the new restaurant, so much so that the staff soon knew her usual order by heart. On busy days, she'd even call ahead for delivery straight to her office. But less than a month into her regular visits, something strange happened. One afternoon at work, Fatu was too tired to leave for lunch, so she ordered her usual meal from the restaurant. When the food arrived, she started eating right away. Near the end of her meal, she was horrified to find a dead cockroach nestled in the food. Shocked and confused, Fatu stopped eating immediately. Normally, she would eat quickly without paying close attention to the food, as she was used to street food. She tossed the remaining food aside, brushing it off as a one-time mistake. However, a week later, Fatu fell gravely ill and was admitted to the hospital. She suffered from a severe fever and an upset stomach that left her weak and dehydrated. After conducting tests, the doctor informed her that her illness was caused by a rare bacteria, one that only breeds in extremely unhygienic conditions. He advised her, always make sure your food is prepared in a clean environment. The doctor told Fatu, "You're fortunate we caught this in time. This infection is dangerous enough to kill within days." Fatu thanked him, grateful to be discharged and put on medication. When she returned home, Amina took on the role of caregiver, making sure Fatu had meals prepared at home. But once Fatu recovered fully, she slipped back into her old habit of eating out. Surprisingly, she continued patronizing the same restaurant where she'd previously found the cockroach in her food. Within 3 weeks, she found herself in the hospital yet again with the same symptoms. After a third bout of illness, Fatu decided to do some investigating herself. She couldn't understand how a place that appeared so clean and luxurious could be making her so sick. Determined to find out, she visited the restaurant one weekend afternoon. This time, she ordered her usual meal but ate it slowly, carefully inspecting each bite to check for any contamination. Once she finished eating, she pretended to need the restroom and asked a waiter to point her in the right direction. When Fatu reached the restroom, she found it occupied. Deciding to pass the time, she began to look around the restaurant. As she wandered down a hallway, she noticed a swinging door leading to the kitchen. Curious, she peeked inside, and what she saw left her stunned. Piles of dirty dishes were stacked beside the cooking area, and raw meat sat exposed with swarms of flies hovering over it. The cooks in the kitchen had disheveled hair, and their aprons, stained with various spills, looked as if they hadn't been washed in months. The floor was filthy, and rats scurried freely around the kitchen. Then Fatu noticed the head cook, a large, dark-skinned woman in a sleeveless gown. Her teeth were yellowed, and her unkempt armpits were visible as she stirred a pot with a spoon she'd just used to scratch herself. Fatu felt a wave of nausea rise within her, but she managed to slip back to her seat in the restaurant, pretending nothing was wrong. As she sat there, her stomach churned with a newfound fear. How many other restaurants might be like this one? She thought of all the places she had eaten, even those that seemed spotless on the outside. When Fatu returned home, she was filled with shame and regret, wishing she had listened to Amina's advice about home-cooked meals long ago. That day, Fatu made a firm decision: she would start cooking her own meals. She cleaned her kitchen and turned to the internet to learn new recipes. Determined, she headed to the market to buy utensils and fresh ingredients. When Amina returned that evening, she was surprised to find Fatu in the kitchen. She quickly changed into her house clothes and joined her. Together, they prepared the meal, and though it didn't look as perfect as the fancy dishes from the restaurant, it tasted delicious. Fatu was proud to know exactly how the food was made, and more importantly, that it was prepared with care and cleanliness. Fatu continued learning to cook from online tutorials and with Amina's help. She stopped eating out and began bringing her own meals to work. Her colleagues were impressed and often asked to join her for lunch. Meanwhile, Emeka returned after some time and apologized for walking away from Fatu when he discovered she couldn't cook. Instead of leaving, he should have encouraged her and helped her grow. Fatu and Emeka made amends and soon got married. The moral lesson of this story is a reminder that not everything is as clean as it seems. It's important to know where and how your food is prepared. Also, no matter how busy life gets, always make time for your loved ones, especially your children. When you truly love someone, don't turn away because of a flaw. Instead, support them in improving and growing.